Shall we just kick it off then?
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, Chris, for being here. Very happy that you can make time again to visit us during our guild meeting. I'm still very proud to still do this meeting with all you guys here, and it's been years now, and we miss only a few. Perhaps we can count the missed guild meetings on a few hands, and we're always very proud if there's somebody from the development team in here, and you're the big guy. So thanks again for being here. Now today a bunch of questions, and to start off with was something just for me and a lot of guild members as well, and a lot of players in the game as well, is thank you and the team as well for the shrines. Without even
Yeah.
looking at what they're doing to us, without the added power, I think one of the most coolest things we've been seeing is that we've been grouping up to get all the required parts, and some of them are more tough to get than the other ones, and some of them you can just stumble upon, and some of them you really need to grab a group and go do it. It brought way more energy in the game, and I think that's really cool, and it adds some power as well, and that makes it even more better. But I think the fact that we felt compelled to group up and go out and go do stuff, that's really awesome. Big thumbs up from a lot of us regarding that.
Awesome. Yeah, those were. We were looking for ways to add deco to loot. I mean, we're always looking at ways to improve loot, and this was that was largely Elgarion. We did a lot of talking, and I helped a lot with the runes and actually making things work and showing them how to set stuff up. But a lot of that was him and coming up with the idea of just trying to come up with stuff you guys would actually want as players that doesn't feel like it's going to be OP. The rarity of things, his initial stab was to make it so they were all about equally hard to get. They ended up not being equally hard to get. But we ended up thinking that was okay. We didn't adjust things too much. I think one of them, I think more spawns too. But other than that, we haven't changed too much on them. Yeah, glad to hear it's driving some cooperation within guilds.
Yeah, great. And another part which is tied to that a little bit, and I think the more we can see of that, the better it is. Some of those new artifact types, which have a very specific zone they can drop, are really good. So we can park our asses in a scene, and we just know if we kill enough air elementals, for example, we will get that recipe, or we will get that Sutax Blaster. It would be really cool if for other harder artifact types to collect and even harder to make into a legendary or like Sage Sash. Going for an epic Sage Sash can be quite a grind if you don't want to buy all those Sage Sashes. Would be really cool if in time more artifacts would have certain locations or certain mobs where they have a bit better drop chance. Is there?
Yeah, that is part of our plan, and that's one of the things we're consciously trying to do is make sure when we go back and touch stuff, or when we add a new artifact, make it so find a place that is some places are kind of they need a lot of love before we'd expect players to go there. It'd just be painful to send them there. But any scene that feels like it is currently in a state but underused, putting those type artifacts, spreading those around those type scenes to get the people moving to those scenes, because we have a number of those scenes that they're not quite as good XPs per hour or gold per hour or whatever people are looking for, but it's still a pretty good scene and it has some challenges and gets people moving around.
Cool. Good to hear that.
Yeah. And that's something that Elgarion's been amazing at picking up stuff and also working off of ideas that I've pushed to him. The drops in place, I've been talking about that since I started doing the Tartarus stuff and adding things to Tartarus and trying to put things that only drop in Tartarus. I think that's kind of where I started doing that. But we're trying to do that everywhere we can now. Anytime we add a new item, try to make sure it drops in one place. And I told him it's okay if it drops other places as long as it's just like super crazy rare. Maybe it comes out of like an orange loot bundle or something, but it's just super rare out of that.
Okay. So I'm thinking out that you're explaining this, and this question kind of pops into my head. So when you guys make a loot table and look at the artifacts or drop chances, for example, when your team made the new artifacts, when you make those drop chances, is that something which is just a static number in there, or is it tied to other variables? Could there be a maximum number dropping, or
So we've got a couple of systems that we use. We have a few things that we limit to a certain number dropping, basically per player, player hour or player year, and that's stuff like that we want to be limited on. That's the one that brought that system about was the crowns, dropping crowns in games for players. Obviously, if, we want to make sure that never, someone accidentally puts an extra 0 or 3 extra zeros on something dropping crowns, and all of a sudden it screws up lots of stuff. So we have a system that limits game wide. We use that for crowns. We use that for a few of the loot bundles, but we haven't used it for any of the other loot. What we've been doing instead, for instance, on the ones that Elgarion just put in was, he was asking me how many of, X, Y, or Z drops, or how many of X, Y, and Z are killed per week. And I'll go pull that data and try to extract that data for him and tell him, like, oh, it looks like, 328 wyverns are killed per day in game. And then we go from that and we figure out, okay, well, 328, how many man hours, how many of these things should be dropping? Okay, well, it sounds like 2% good drop rate from it. So we're trying to look at things like that, but we're not limiting them. And we're well aware also, just with some of those changes, before there were, 168 wyverns being killed per day, but as soon as some cool loot goes on, we know that's going to shoot up to 500 or 1,000. So we're taking our best stats at it and trying to come back and adjust where needed. But again, we're trying to leave some of them just kind of, more rare or more exclusive, or don't change the drop rate, but change the number of spawns.
yeah, for example, on the air elementals in the breach, like you did. Okay. So moving on, yeah, Minerva.
We got dead air.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
that's-
Yeah, push the talk button needs to be pressed. Sorry. Sorry, Minerva, you wanted to say something.
Oh, you were just quiet for a long time, and I was afraid something was wrong.
Oh yeah. Oh, I said that is a good, like the air elementals in the breach, like the Sutak bluster drop chance is quite a pita, quite a pain in the ass, and now with more air elementals there, it's more likely to just find one. Even though, and that can still, of course, that's still the RNG part on it. But I know AJ and I have parked our asses there and killed like at least 100 of those air elementals and got like 2. And on the other hand, you can the day later you can still jump in there, kill 2, and get 2. Of course, that's still RNG. RNG is always causing those things, but sometimes it still feels like even with higher spawn, it can be a pain to grind. But on the other hand, once you get the items and you place that shrine, and that air shrine was, for your information, the final shrine we needed for our town to complete the set. So after doing that, of course, we were all super proud and kind of forgot about the struggle for the grind. But at that moment, it felt like, wow, we read in the patch notes that it's different, and we see that there are more mobs now, but we don't see the blusters dropping. But
Yep.
stretch that over a few weeks, and you get it.
Yep. Yeah, and I know RNG is not a thing that's popular, but there's just not a good way, and I don't want to try limiting that. Limiting things, it's a certain number per server hour. I want to make sure if you guys want to and get together, where just because we have instances where you can go to different instances and everybody can farm in their own instance, I would hate for it to feel, I could make it feel worse if I limited it per server, increased the drop rate, but limited it per server. 10 different people in 10 different instances all trying to kill air elementals and still not getting it. That's one that is those are good things to get, because when we want to add, like we're in the process of adding a few new totally original creatures that Damon's wrapping up now. But adding things that are real world creatures like dogs is usually pretty easy, just because there's so many existing models out there, that we can buy. We can go and buy something. If we want to do an original creature, if we want to do add a new gargoyle type creature, we pretty much have to do it from scratch, and it's a massive amount of work. But the dogs, we should be able to get some more of those. We just haven't touched any of that stuff. That's another thing. As we continue to move forward, I'm continuing to try to train up Elgarion and other people on some of these things, so I don't end up being the roadblock on stuff. And also related to that, I'm actually in the process, you guys will be the first to hear this, but I'm probably going to be adding another programmer to the team. So, how it goes, but we've had, I think, it's not a huge secret that we've had some pretty tragic events on the team, just in terms of people losing loved ones, and also, a long-term relationship in divorce, and another person lost, another spouse, and it's dramatically impacted the programmers far more than other people on the team. And so that's really become a bottleneck. And just talking to some people and looking around at best options, and also because Elgarion has worked out so amazingly well, talked to a few people, looked back at who's helped in the past and who I felt had a good attitude and might be available, and actually talking to a longtime community member about possibly joining the team as a full-time programmer to actually go and add some stuff. And it's somebody who already has Unity experience and a significant amount of UI experience, and just some of the other stuff we really take over and own. So, but anyways, I'm hoping to train some more people up, and possibly grow the team a little bit more here in the next few months. But yeah, adding pets is a good one. I don't think I have that much work to do to train people up. Jesus is actually the guy to better do that stuff, and he's actually been helping Elgarion with a lot of things. So maybe I can get him to train Elgarion on adding pets so he can do it.
Okay, cool. Very nice, and it sounds very better even that there perhaps is another programmer joining. That would be really awesome. Awesome to see more hours to be able to spend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people know I do a lot of the programming on the project, but my time gets swallowed up by about a million things, because I also end up doing, I'm also the payroll guy, I'm the advertising guy, and also I'm the build guy, which is a significant amount of time, and the test guy, and it'd be having another full-time programmer who is passionate is actually getting me pretty excited.
Well, and you also come and do talk shows.
Yep, and community stuff, and you guys know I'm all over the place, so it'd be
Sorry, I'm late.
dedicated.
I had a follow-up question that I asked Vero if it was okay if I asked. When it came to the spawners, I actually had a discussion with Algarian about this last week, and we were talking, when he filled in for the stream, because you guys couldn't be on the stream, he was talking about food and different things.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up talking afterwards for a while, but one of the things we talked about is the fact we do have so many animals that are out there, sheep, and yes, we're using horses as mounts, but we can, you can tame them. Already it's all in there, but turning those using existing tech, turning them into spawners. Why couldn't we have cows, horses?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's something Algarian is already like, I think I'm just about where I can do this, and having that be something that we can go out and do, the more that we're able to feel ownership of what we're creating, crafting, baking, etc., tying that into, with existing tech makes sense.
I hope I'm not too late.
Just have a seat, hon. We're doing a radio interview show, so this is one where Vero's pretty much asking all the questions.
Yeah, on the Elgarion adding things, he has been, anytime we've had something where I can like point at here's a pattern, here's how you do one, he has been amazing. I don't know if it's his military background of nose to the grindstone and focus and no interruptions, or postal service or whatever thing it is, but he's been amazing at let me show him a pattern and then him take that and do it 1,000 times without any errors to it. So he's been great at that. So that's the type of stuff that, if he sees that and he sees that's something that it's definitely would be a pattern of, here's how we did 5 of them, can you do 50 more? He'll jump on that and do it super quick, I'm sure.
Cool. And another question coming in, is there ever going to be a way we can raise farm animals?
We talked about that. That's one of those things that, back to Richard times, he of course wanted stuff like that. He wanted to be able to, like, if you put down a boy cow and a girl, in a bull, that maybe you'll have calves come out sometimes. I don't think we'll probably get to that point, but having creatures that age is something that is totally doable. I think the limit on having that is not a tech issue, but more of a the asset issue. Going from chicken eggs to chicks to chickens is fine, but really we have the chicken eggs and we have the chicken and we don't have chicks, and you probably want to see it progress a little bit. But having farm animals raised is absolutely something I would love to do. I mean, just like some of the stuff with that we already have in there when we put it in originally, discussing farm animals and can we apply this to farm animals as well, is something that was brought up in the conversation. And that one of the system that was discussed was actually whiskey and liquors, where you age those things. I know that seems silly to compare aging your chicken egg into a chicken through the same system, but it's actually got a lot of the same elements to it.
Well, it also goes along with what we have already for farming. You plant a seed, depending on what it is, after so many hours, you see a different image, and it progresses on.
Yeah, and there's some situations where that would be not that hard. Again, the limits on the tech are not that. We don't have too many limits on the tech. It's really more about figuring out the assets and figuring out stuff like, what does this look like? Do we give you a chicken coop, and the chicken coop produces eggs that you can go and harvest, and that's kind of like the farming thing? Or is it, here's the cows, and you can go to the cows every day and get milk from them, and it really follows kind of the farming pattern? Or do we do something different? There's a couple of those categories where it really feels like it makes sense, like the two I just described. But then you start getting into other stuff of like, what about piglets and bacon and baby pigs and things having babies? So there's some of those things that would fit much easier into one of the categories we already have. But really the limit has just been more a matter of trying to figure out the assets. That probably will be if we add somebody after this programmer, adding probably, well, really what we need a level guy, and we need one more full-time artist to try and offload some of the stuff off of Travis. What we're finding with the long-term development with the small team is it's all very doable, but there is a significant amount of overhead on everybody in the team. And the team size we have is more than capable of keeping up with that overhead, but it is a pretty big drain. So adding people to the team, we believe, just seeing Elgarion when he comes on the team, he doesn't really have much overhead compared to, like a Sanyo, who does amazing things, but he's got a lot of bug backlog. And he also has a lot of, people need changes to pots that he has to make, and just general stuff, seasonal changes to creature types, those type things. He has a lot of overhead. And so when we add new people, as we've seen with Elgarion, having someone coming in who's not burdened with all that overhead, they can get some pretty amazing stuff done. Not to mention they come in and they're super passionate and not, exhausted by 7 years of development like some of us are.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. That's actually, if you guys have seen less of Wizard Smoke, just because he did have some significant personal life issues come up, very long-term relationship status change and selling a house or whatever. He's actually on a sabbatical where he's checking in and he's doing stuff, and he's got some minimal stuff, but I've told him to stay away from the computer. Don't come back until you feel better about it. So he'll probably be back. He said he's kind of shooting for, well, depends on when you ask him, but it changes because he's hoping he can take the sabbatical long enough so Barton Springs, which is a famous swimming hole here in Austin, is more useful. But he's actually been going to Barton Springs already. So, but anyways, so I look forward to hopefully mid-year when we have another programmer back, and we can really get rolling on some of the tech stuff that we've kind of fallen behind on just because I'm the only guy doing a lot of tech at the moment.
Okay. So I'm looking at the questions a little bit, and I think I'm gonna try to group it up a little bit and just make it a few topics rather than random questions more. But a few things people asked were all related to the guild dungeons, and it varies from there are some older rooms, for example the spider encounter room, which isn't convertible yet. We can't make it into a spawner room yet. Are there any plans on changing big things or existing things in the player dungeons?
Lately, I'm not sure you've seen, but there's been a few bugs fixed in dungeons. I'm looking at some stuff right now. We've got some. Can't put my finger on exactly when things started to break, but we've had some odd pathfinding stuff, some nav mesh stuff break, which may not seem that important, but it's the type of stuff that blocks sometimes your pets from being working in a dungeon or in a specific room in a dungeon, or it blocks, keeps your pet from wandering or following you.
I can assure you I have noticed those.
Yeah, so I've been looking at those things, and there's also, I think released before last, there's an issue with basically rooms and items getting disconnected in dungeons and getting lost. Fixing some of those things so we can kind of get to a point. I've had people who told me they're done with dungeons until like that particular bug got fixed. They were saying I can't keep losing stuff. So that was a big fix. The plans for dungeon stuff, I don't think it's been a secret, and we've talked about it a fair amount on stream. And Ravlox has talked about this on our public stream, so I don't think this part's any secret either, which is he just lost his wife maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. He'd actually been up trying to take care of things for a month or two before that, so he's been the one who was supposed to be working on dungeons all this time and really wants to work on player dungeon stuff, but he's also been completely out of hand trying to take care of things, and now dealing with this current situation of his wife passed away with 3 kids who are also in a family. So player the player side, or the data side for player dungeon stuff, that's the stuff he really wanted to tackle and was excited about, and I think he's actually talked about that on streams before. So I haven't done too much for that because that was something I was hoping to hand off to him. I do expect him to be back and able to focus on the project in the not too distant future once things settle down a little bit. So hopefully he can get to those. I'm trying to work on, again, trying to figure out some of the tech issues or workarounds for issues for the nav mesh stuff, for things not being able to be summoned or placed or path before I work on any data stuff. But some of that specific data stuff, I would love to say, I bet Elgarian will pick that up, but Elgarian's doing such an amazing job of the stuff he's been touching. I'm really trying to transition a lot of the crafting stuff from Beezus over to Elgarian's plate, just in terms of new recipes, and he did a great job with the food stuff. Did you guys have any feedback on the food changes that went in this release?
Nope. I'm enjoying by far a whole bunch of them. I'm excited. The only question I have is nobody seems to be able to find one of the ingredients for one of the new recipes. So I was actually going to see, I wasn't going to bug you with it, but you brought it up. The obsidian bacon uses salted obsidian pork.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's found that recipe. Now,
Okay.
the obsidian bacon is supposed to be this really cool drop, but it's completely reteachable. So in other words, that means you don't need the drop. It's a wasted thing because you just have to know the stuff in it. So I just put it up by the kitchen table, so literally anybody can learn it through discovery, because if it's reteachable, you can learn it by discovery. But you can't find that one ingredient. So I don't know if it's just we've just been really unlucky, or did it get put in, or because the other one is discoverable. So I tried to use, like we did back in the old days before there were regular recipes, you had to find things by discovery. And so I tried to do it that way. It did not work.
Okay, well, I just messaged him to see if maybe he has an idea. He might already know about it. But yeah, he's got a lot more recipes that he has, trying to really systematize that. I think people knew I touched recipes not too long ago and did a little cleanup, but really that was just to move it from the system where it was at to the new system where it can actually have multiple slots. Which allows us to try and balance things, because of course, unless scarcity is a huge factor, if you only have 2 slots and everything's equal points, you're gonna settle on 2 things and never use anything else. It feels like there's no choice. So, but he now took that and looked at everything, all the recipes that were in there, and tried to turn it into a real system data-wise. Which again is one of those things to call out that he's just amazing at, is taking hundreds of pieces of data, throwing it into a spreadsheet, and then actually doing the work to put it together. So,
and I like that it's not just about, the big 3, strength, int, and dex. That there's other things in there, like how fast you can learn things, finding underutilized foods, and making them actually something you might want to use. Cracked me up because, like, the cake has been phenomenal. We've had that for ages, use it for deco, all this stuff. All of a sudden now it's something you actually are going to consume.
I would love to add something to that, and that's a question, and perhaps that's a good little bridge into a topic for crafting. But with all the new changes and with all the various effects our foods have, is there an option we can see what we can make in our recipe books, or when it's on the table, for example, before we make it, so that we know what we are about to get when we make it, without external sources?
Currently, no. Again, that's the number one thing the programmer I'm hiring, I expect him to be working on, is tackling the UI stuff, including possibly moving us to the newer, better version of UI that is the Unity built-in version. Because we started on the project, 6+ years ago. At that time, there was no Unity UI. The only Unity UI they had was completely unusable, performance-wise and functionality-wise. And they basically dragged their feet releasing a UI system for 3 or 4 years, and then finally got something out. But by that time, it was too late unless we wanted to redo all of our UI stuff. And this has hurt us both in maintaining things and also in terms of performance. The number one performance drag on the game in most situations where frame rate starts dropping, well, there's 2 categories. There's one is you're in a really crowded town, a very heavy deco town, lots of lights. You guys probably know about that. And then the other one is you're in a heavy combat situation and your frame rate will start to drop in a party. And the second one of those, if you turn off your UI, I think you see that everything speeds up. And that is, again, that's largely because we're using this outdated UI system that is tough to move us out of. And that's actually what I'm hoping the new guy is going to be able to do, is not just take over UI, but go through and, basically I would describe it as fossilize the old stuff, like slowly start replacing little bits and little bits here and there until finally the old system's been completely replaced with a new one. Yeah, that's the type of stuff, because there's these things that seem like they should be easy to do, and we get them all the time of like, can you get the the book sorted, or improve the UI, or add a search field, and a lot of those things you start diving into it, and it should be easy. It is absolutely not, due to the old system. There's also a lot of stuff in terms of performance that it does not handle well in terms of like texture atlasing, which may not mean much to you guys. I'm sure there's probably a tech person or two out there or someone who will watch this. That is, you take, rather than having 1,000 little images for little icons or corner pieces to UI or little buttons on the UI, you take all those things and you put them into a single texture, pack them into a single texture, and then you use offsets for those things to do all the drawing, which seems like a lot of silliness, but it actually is very important to how video card works. It reduces the draw calls, improves batching, because the video card, instead of it having to like say, okay, I want to draw an icon, let me load that icon, you know, here it is, now I got it, now I'm going to draw it over here with these attributes. It basically just says, here's my texture sheet, and here's, you know, copy this out of that and this out of that, and you don't have to do as many, nearly as much work. It's much, much easier on the graphics card, much better for performance, and just across the board better GPU and CPU and memory. But anyways, the old system doesn't support a lot of the things we need very well. So hopefully the new guys can be fixing up that. And again, long answer and off down a rabbit hole, but that my hope is that this is going to allow us to fix a lot of these user interface issues and stuff like what you just described, where you want to be able to mouse over something, get more information. Right now, even the guy who wrote that stuff is afraid to go and touch a lot of that stuff, just because it is so old and so fragile. It's also becoming problematic as we try to move forward to newer Unity versions. UI is one of those things that breaks in odd ways every time I try to move forward. I think I've handled most of them, but our next plan for Unity upgrades is probably going to be to skip Unity 2019, just because everybody says exactly what we're seeing, which is we saw as much as a 30 to 40% performance drop, which is not something we're willing to accept just to get on a newer version with a few less, hopefully less bugs and some new features. 2020 does not have that big performance hit, so we'll probably jump forward, but that's my belief, is we're going to be running into a headache of UI issues when we do it. We will see. But yes, I would love to get that type of information in there and make, again, get our UI to the point where it doesn't feel scary to try and add simple stuff like that.
Yeah. I can imagine, and you saying scary kind of triggered this quote I wrote down, and I think a lot of us think about this a little bit similar. The crafting overhaul, we are all super excited but kind of terrified. We love all the changes, but of course we're all very curious in what is all going to change, and is it just user interface part, or is it going to be stripped down to the bottom and rebuilt? Well, everybody's very curious is what's going to be happening over the time in crafting, of course.
I think what people saw with the food stuff is it's going to be that level of redoing things. We're trying to be careful not to make things less powerful when we do things. We are trying to make things more intentional and well thought out and planned out, rather than what we have, which a lot of the stuff we have is just slowly evolved over time. And we were looking at the food, and I had to go back and dig through my brain to try and remember how we got to where we were with some of the food stuff. And I think there's actually an old video stream that's still available on YouTube that you can go look, that was Richard's initial ideas for food, which is where a lot of the initial food stuff came from. Because he wanted the components in to equal the buff out, and it was all based on like carbohydrates and fat and proteins, and that determined all your buffs, and those things were associated with strength dex in, which is where a lot of the not very interesting outputs from the recipes came from, and also why they felt very unbalanced. There were some that were just really, why would you use anything other than these 3 or 4 recipes with how it was before? Yeah. And also the fact that only a few things got buffs, and all went back to that. So I think there's that same type of shift in terms of rethinking a lot of the recipes is going to happen. But just like with the current food stuff and the change to food stuff, I think it's going to be equally as positive as what you saw from the food stuff last release, and also we'll be getting a lot of that stuff this release. As many more of the recipes actually get added to fill out the gaps that are currently there. I think people should be excited about it. I think that people who probably will be a bit scared by it are people who keep web pages that are manually updated. But that is another thing I would love to get in there, is the person who is, I'm looking at bringing on for the programming stuff, who's going to be doing this stuff, is someone who played a lot with Lua and the Lua interfaces in the game. And I would love for him to be able to help expose some of these things. You know, when he's doing the UI, well, okay, also want you to add a Lua hook so people, if they want to, can come and query the UI and just write like a Lua script that will actually like dump all the, you know, here's the recipes that I have and what the outputs are from them, so that people who would do web pages, you know, they can have a spreadsheet that basically updates itself pulled from that. So, but yeah, I think people should be a little scared, but I think they should be more excited than scared, because I think it's all going to be good. We're also being really cautious in terms of trying to make sure what we're doing is progress for players, both in terms of power as well as making things make sense. So we're trying to make sure we don't take old recipes that were cool before and suddenly make them, you know, junk that you'll never use again. We're really trying to make sure everything becomes usable rather than just a handful of things. And, you know, we probably will keep some of the same random number stuff that's in there now, but we're trying to make that more friendly as well. Because, yeah, we don't like the idea of, we hate that you have to make 500 or something to get the one you want. But we're trying to figure out how to make that work and still fit into the economy, because if we eliminate that, obviously we, you know, sorry miners, we don't need all that ore anymore, and we kind of break the whole economy loop for a lot of people. So
Yeah, tricky.
yeah, I think it'll happen. I think this is all going to happen pretty quick in terms of, you know, not next month, but, you know, within a quarter or two, you guys will start seeing some of those huge crafting changes we've been wanting to get for a while.
On that topic, perhaps this is one of the big crafting changes you were already thinking about. But a while ago, many streams ago, you were talking a little bit about perhaps being able to salvage artifacts and get some kind of artifact power from it, and we could use that in a recipe to craft something, adopting that power. Is that still something which is being looked at or thought about?
Yes, that's something that's being looked at and thought about. And again, that's one of those things that we kind of already have some of the, you know, the pattern there that can be followed for other stuff. That is, again, why I think once the food stuff is done, I expect Elgaran to wrap up food stuff this release. But I think he'll be able to get to some of that type of cooler stuff, you know, more crafting stuff. I think he'll be able to get to that within just a few months, and kind of do that same thing where you guys go from just a handful of choices of things that can be socketed to, you know, dozens of things. And also, you know, hey, guess what? That artifact you didn't care about before, this drop that you didn't care about before, is suddenly valuable. Not because you actually want to use it, but, you know, hey, maybe that shield of attraction actually gives something that if you put it in, you know, your chest plate is suddenly actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Cool. So I'm just thinking if I have more specific things on crafting. Yeah, I have one more. Is there a way we can get some more predictability with salvaging when we salvage stuff?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, a lot of these things, because they evolved over time, you know, I'm not trying to point a finger at, you know, Richard did something bad or Beezus did something bad. It's really just a more matter of, rather than it being, you know, sit down, look at it for 2 weeks and then come up with everything. It really, all these parts just kind of slowly got plopped into place. No, we added another, 3 recipes or 5 things this release, and now we add 5 more salvaging things. I think the salvaging of stuff will become more uniform and more or less random. as we do that whole pass again, where we go look at everything in the game, and rather than it happen in a few items per release, instead we take everything and we look at it and like, okay, let's go reevaluate all of the salvaging stuff. Look at the inputs and the outputs, and then come up with a real plan for it and adjust everything. So I think you'll see things become far more predictable. Again, kind of in the same way you guys just saw the food stuff come. It's much easier when you're looking at things all together with it all done, rather than it's slowly evolving over time. I think a lot of the imbalances came from that slowly evolving over time, and us never really throwing everything out and just like trying to replan from scratch with everything all at once. So yes, I think,
in other words, you can't see the forest because of the trees. Instead, taking back and looking at the whole forest, taking a big picture.
Yeah.
Nice. So another topic, and this is kind of combined from a few death mages and a few players who really like to play summoner builds in different games. And I have a bunch of questions from the same area of death magic and summoning, but perhaps you can just to make it a bit more easy. Do you have any ideas about adding more power over time or more abilities over time to summoned pets, or have us make them stronger than the passive we currently have?
So I can tell you the goal is that tamed pets will probably always be a little bit ahead of everybody else, but we are continuing to shift summoned pets to be more powerful. Most of the elementals last release got a boost. This release things got boost through food stuff. I think the undead one is one that I've continued to look at ways to make it feel better, and it's a little more challenging. I'm trying to not just turn up numbers, make things have more health and hit a little harder. That's a lot of that stuff happened with the elementals, although they did get a few new additions here and there to try to make them feel a little bit different. But especially for death mages, it feels like they should have a more unique summoning ability. That's one of the ones. Making it so you can summon multiple skeletons is one of the big ones that I'm looking at right now, rather than it just being a single skeleton, actually making it a little skeleton pack. The other option is making it so rather than skeletons be a summoned thing that is you summon it and control it, making it so those now become you summon them, but you don't actually control them. Basically it's kind of a heat-seeking missile type thing, is you summon skeletons and it fights things that are against you, but you don't actually order them around, and making them more disposable. Again, just trying to look at ways to make them both feel more effective and also feel more like you would expect them to feel as a death mage. Rather than having one skeleton mage, great, you can summon 5 and it uses the same thing as corpse explosion, where it'll actually take a corpse and a corpse falls, and great, now you can bring up that corpse as a skeleton or as a zombie and make it so it actually is a kind of a heat-seeking missile, or just a summon that does its thing until it stops doing its thing. But again, those guys are next on my list of summoned guys to do. I think I might have mentioned this one place before, I'm trying to remember if I have, but we actually have an entire new skill tree that will be coming out soon. That is a skill tree based on episode 2 story stuff. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I may have only mentioned this in a conversation to one person. So you guys are kind of the first ones to hear about some of this stuff. But this is actually a skill tree that Sanyo is passionate about. That will be an entire new skill tree that has a lot of summoning elements to it. I don't want to give away too much stuff, but it is a whole new skill tree of a whole new type of category of magic. I'll say it's magic-like stuff, but it does have a lot of summoning elements to it.
Okay. You got our interest here.
Yep. That will be coming out. I'm not going to say it'll be. I doubt it'll happen by the next talk. It won't happen by April, but by mid-year we should have that. And again, this is one that is something that'll probably interest a lot of people. Is this is a Sanyo thing that he's passionate about designing, and is all heavily based on some of the story stuff. So I'm excited about it.
Cool. No, actually, the last few things you explained, specifically about the death magic stuff, ticked a few questions on the death mage part. So thanks, and summoner part. So thanks on that. I think people are really happy with all these cool new ideas being thrown at us here. Now, another big question I had for myself. This is just something I'm absolutely hoping that we are going to be seeing more of in good time. And sometimes we go out with a small group and do some older content we don't do very often anymore, and then we always feel like the first times 4 years ago that we were able to finally group up and do the mage room. It was super fun, and now we run in there and we blast everything to death in seconds. We are seeing more tiered zones, and I was wondering if it's on the menu, or is it very hard to make like a copy of the Rise, or different the Krull, or different other older dungeons, and make it into the normal hard extreme mode version?
Yes, and that's actually I was going to mention. I've been talking about how new gear is going to be more powerful. We're trying to make sure we don't make people feel like the gear they had suddenly got weaker. Well, we can't have too much power inflation without making some adjustments. So that's another one of those things as I was talking about earlier, that we really need to, as Minerva was saying, back up and see the forest rather than the trees. Back up and take the big picture look at things and try and come up with plans for things. That's one of the areas where we will be backing up and taking a big look at things, is currently creature difficulty throughout the game. I think I've talked about this on streams before, but that was part of the episode 2, the variable difficulty scenes. Part of the reason for that was also looking at what you guys could handle and where do things become challenging. What do we need to do to get things to a challenging level again? And then taking that and going back and applying that to existing levels. I'd always intended the Rise to be like this is in-game, this is challenging stuff. I think you guys probably heard the story that was actually a dungeon I made just because at the time I was a little frustrated with our level designers who were focusing purely on visuals rather than focusing on play mechanics. And so for each one of those things, I was trying to demonstrate a play mechanic style. Like you talk about the mage room of having like, okay, here's a way, there's multiple different ways to take it. There's multiple different ways to fight from, and you can fight from above. You can pick your best corridor. There's lots of different ways you can deal with that. So that's a scene I would love to go back and maybe I can do it this release, since I think this is a 5-week release coming up, and I don't have a ton on my plate, but going back and fixing up some of those scenes to actually be meaningful again in terms of the current power level of players.
Wait a second. You're saying you have time on your hand? Would you like us to help you fill that time in the hand? We'll be glad.
I don't have it. I can tell you, I don't plan on having a blizzard, and I don't plan on having to spend 8 days of my 15-day release working on Unity stuff. That doesn't happen. But I will obviously be doing lots of bug fixing. I'm actually sitting on a patch right now that has a few critical bug fixes in it that apparently are things that have been broken for a long time, and a few exploits and a few annoyances fixed. But yeah, I every now and then, I've mentioned this before, for me going back and making levels or adjusting levels and trying to make things meaningful. For one thing, it keeps me in touch with how you guys actually play and gets me in there playing a lot, which I need to do as much as I can and try to figure out what you guys are doing. But it also, to me, is a little bit of a relaxation reward stuff. As much as we're trying to stay focused on polish and bug fixing and those type things, because that is what gets us more new players over time, which is really our goal. It is not as rewarding in a lot of different ways to just sit there and fix bugs and fix bugs and fix bugs. Actually being able to go in and take a level and see, put your hands on stuff for me and like adjust rooms. That's like, I remember this room. This would be so much cooler now if I changed this, that, and the other thing. But the Rise was actually one I was looking at, but I was trying to figure out if I wanted to expand on the areas that were there or go back and touch the stuff that's in there. Maybe I'll do a little bit of both and have a little bit of a Rise reboot.
No, you just saying this with a large amount of proud, but we have some very good, strong technical players in the game, and I know we aren't the biggest voiced players when it comes to screaming at the developers, but we are very technical in what we can achieve, and please join us, and we would love to show some different things. Or if you want us to show us different things, just throw us in a scene, and we'll show you what we do. Or there's nothing at the moment which is not being done. So we would totally love to show that. We are always very open on that, and I think a lot of other guilds, of course, are as well. But it's a select group doing very specific things, I think. So just when you see us on, jump in and take a look. No secrets here. Now, I was thinking, it's last few minutes, perhaps we can make it a little bit of open mic. I have a few more questions, but I have this gut feeling that this is not the last time that you will be joining us, so we can keep it a little bit, and I would love to give the mic in the audience for people who just want to ask.
Okay. Right. So going back to what you were saying about the Rise, Chris, obviously, by the way, I do need to show you something in Ulfheim, something I discovered which I don't think has been patched yet, but we'll get to that. The way it works, where you have to do one area to progress to the next, is there any plans, or is there any chance you could possibly introduce something like that into the Rise, where the Lich Room is the final destination, and you get some kind of epic loot or something upon completion?
Yes, and that's something that Sanyo's kind of been the master of that stuff. When I made the Rise originally, I mean, that's another reason to go back and touch the Rise, touch up, give some love to the Rise, is when I made it originally, a lot of that tech didn't exist or was pretty fragile. With the bugs that I fixed in it and, just being used in a bunch of places now, it's getting a lot less fragile, and Sanyo is the type who, I've given those guys, anytime I make a level, Sanyo will always go and fix it, basically. Go and try and add that stuff in there. But that's the type of stuff I would love to make. I mean, the thing I was looking at doing was, right now, the kind of the boss room, as I'd always intended it, was the Lich room in the Rise, with the boss Lich, and making that kind of the start of, coming off the back of that is actually, here's the second half of the dungeon, building out from that spot. So clean up, but also expanding, actually making more square footage of the dungeon too, and then introducing some of that type of, some of the stuff that Sanyo has, making it so there's actually section, you have to beat so-and-so to get through there. Because that is one of the things that's frustrated me with watching how players do the Rise so often is, they'll run through the whole dungeon, not kill anything to get to where they want to go, and they go to exactly that spot rather than it feeling like it's an ongoing progression. So yeah, I would love to have that type of stuff in there. And Sanyo's actually working on a big level himself right now, but he's always willing to help out with other stuff. He'll jump in and fix up stuff if I tell him what I want.
Awesome.
And also, List is actually working on a map right now that he's been working on for a while. He did the Well of Alder stuff, which was just one that we'd kind of been looking at, that also was one we kind of wanted to experiment a little bit with, because we keep occasionally pushing the idea of having a new player-owned town type. We'd intended to have it out with episode 2, but actually having a floating island player-owned town type that people could use. It was basically a group of islands, floating islands that people can build their pots on, just for, doesn't provide that much more, but just for another cool looking type of pot. But List is actually working on, now they got Well of Alder done, he's back on his big map, which is a big story map that will be the largest map in the game, significantly larger than even like Blood Bay or something. And that is episode 2 story map. Again, I'm not sure when it'll be out. It could be out on the talk in April, but it definitely won't be out it won't be out for the March release.
Okay.
If you have another follow up with that, I'm sorry, AJ.
No, that
I thought
pretty
you
much,
were
no, that pretty much answered it, honestly, because I will admit I'm one of the few, or one of the many, that will just beeline straight to the lit room. Have died quite a few times in there. I am only human. But recently I have been frequent in the mage room simply because of the increased chance for Onk of Sacrifice, which will be nice to frequent parts of the game or certain areas that aren't really being touched because there's no reason to go there. But obviously, and that's actually another question. I can't remember if someone asked it, but with the recent release of artifacts in certain places, like Vex Spark on Fire Elementals and etc., it'll be nice to go to certain areas to farm a specific artifact. Is there any plans to kind of broaden that to include more artifacts?
Yeah, I'm trying to only do it with new artifacts. I feel like with the old artifacts, there's so many out there that moving it so they only drop in a certain spot probably won't matter that much. I mean, I'm sure some people will be excited about it because it'll probably increase the value of them. And all the stuff they have for sale will go up. But trying to do it only with the new artifact. But that was one of the things I wanted to do with the Rise, was also go and create reasons. Obviously when I created the Rise, when I created the Rise, that was another thing I was kind of upset with the designers at that time that we had, was it didn't feel like they understood the idea of how people want to play. Some people want to progress through scenes, and move from place to place to place and explore and try to handle that. But then there's a lot of people that want to have camps, and I just felt like none of the level designers were actually making camps. So that was actually when I made the Rise, I made it as camps, which is something that really lends itself well to what you're just talking about, having specific artifacts. Oh, well, you want the new book artifact? Well, that's obviously going to drop in the library at the Rise and just be a rare drop off of some mage. But yeah, now that we've been talking about it, I think I'm more inspired to go back and do that cleanup and that improvement on the Rise to try to fix things up. The Rise is, I hate touching too much of it, so I may be doing what I said before and just adding some areas to it, because I think the Rise right now is still, even though it hasn't been touched in a long time, it's still one of the top 5 or 6 most played maps if you exclude Pot and the starter scenes. Obviously right now I think Well of Alder's up there, and then a couple of the other new scenes, but then the Rise is always like in the top 5 or 6 scenes, so definitely give some love.
I have a question, but
Very
before
nice.
I do, I thought might be nice for some of the players that are in here don't know why it got the name The Rise and what that was all about, because I always think stories with Maxine are always fun.
Stories with Maxine? Well, I'm trying to remember why I named the Rise.
Well, you told me it was because you were getting up in the morning with her early, and before you, yeah.
Yeah. No, I try to, it's one of those weird things that I try to sneak in as much stuff into the game as I can that's personal stuff, but I also try to not put anything that's me in the game. I've had continually have requests that why isn't there, some Atos town? There's like so much Lord British stuff and Dark Star stuff, and
Yeah, like it took forever to get a.
It's me. So there is a lot of stuff in there that is me stuff. I just don't put my name on it. It's more stuff like that, and then there's actually a number of artifacts that are things that relate to friends or families, and I just haven't even mentioned it. Like, I probably need to give them better stuff, but I think every one of my family members has some item in the game. The one that's like the Ring of Evelyn is actually my mom, or the Thimble of Evelyn. That's actually my mom who was sewing. I think when I made that, my mom was sewing a lot of clothes for Maxine, and so I was like, well, I'm going to make an artifact for my mom, and Evelyn is her middle name. So I'm always sneaking stuff in there, but that's another one of those that, again, looking for a cool name, and then, yeah, getting up early in the morning for Maxine's and building stuff around it. But, yeah, I'll try and sneak stuff in.
Now, I actually have an actual question. One of the things I noticed in your goals for this year, when you put it out there, was really focusing more instead of on new content as much as fixing and getting rid of, really focusing on the bugs. And as seeing that's happening, seeing more and more of that, I just want to express how much I appreciate it, because I've been gone for months and haven't really been playing. It's really neat to come back and say, oh man, this is working. Oh, look at this. This is seeing less of the bug thing, So I guess the question is, are you going to continue to and you've got a team here when we know to do something, putting stuff on QA, really let us try to break it. Like with the crafting stuff, tell us ahead of time, hey, this is what's going to be there. Let us go and try to find the weak points, because we'll find that, oh, there isn't this ingredient, it hasn't dropping right, or this isn't it. We'll give you that feedback, but really utilizing that, are you going to continue to do that? Have you found that it's successful, not successful? What's your feedback on that?
I think we did really good with that for a couple of months, and then again, I've mentioned the whole, with a small team, we found that I just basically have to add some more people to the team, because to some extent, half of the time is spent treading water and just keeping our heads above water. But we were doing really well at that. That's one that fell apart, I think, largely due to again, Ravlox's less involvement in the game to deal with personal family stuff. Because he was the one driving a lot of that stuff. And then also just the last couple of months, we've just had a few disasters, and sometimes literally disasters, that have kept us from getting things on QA. I was trying to get that going again. We've got Laney's helping a lot with things now, and a few other people that are doing some amazing stuff. So I think we can get back into the groove of getting stuff to QA earlier and get QA updated constantly. Oh, I know the other one that was blocking.
Telling us what to look for. So I know myself personally, and I've heard this from others, is, okay, the new QA builds up. You go on there, you're like, well, what am I looking for? What am I doing? If I know this is what we're putting in, this is what we're trying to do, we're putting in the new crafting stuff. Then we know to go in and start crafting, but just to log in and go,
I've got some good information on that. And again, I think as much as I would love to get some new content in, and we are in some new content, and we'll be touching up old content, as I've mentioned. The new stuff, if I go and look, anytime I see reviews or get feedback, we've seen things trending in a much more positive way for new players entering the game, getting feedback from them. And even, I try not to look at it just because it burns my eyes, but even going to Steam and seeing that, we've been in the 70 to 80% positive range for a long time, which for a game like ours, where it takes a lot of effort to get into it, getting up there is great. If we can keep things at 70 to 80% positive, there's always going to be 20% of people are going to get a negative review, but that type of stuff makes me happy and makes me think we're doing the right thing by working on polish. But for the QA stuff and getting that going forward, that's actually last week at the team meeting, we were talking about stuff, and one of the things that came up was, well, one, do we want to push the release and just skip this release, which we decided not to do, which was a little rough, but it didn't end up being that rough. But one of the things that came up was, as I continually try to get Elgarion being as productive as possible on making the game better and shifting him away from some of the stuff he started on and getting him working on the stuff he's passionate about, like the recipe stuff he just did and some of the art.
Fantastic.
But one of the things that is his biggest time sink is actually doing the weekly emails and post, and then also the monthly release notes. So actually out of that came that we probably won't do the same type of weekly updates. That's kind of something that Star said when he was willing to spend half of his time working on that. I would rather not have anybody on the team spending hours and hours and hours on those updates. But we do need to get the information across to you guys. Some of that was done for marketing reasons, and I don't know that we really get that much out of the marketing aspect of it. The other reason it's done is so you guys know what to see in the patch notes, but that also matters more for QA, what you just mentioned, that you guys don't know what to test. So I started digging into ways we could improve the system, improve how that stuff works. And one of the things I came up with, is I've already started working on it, is moving to an automated system rather than a manual system where someone like Elgarion or me has to go and like manually copy the patch notes and figure out what needs to go into it and how to describe it, and instead put it on the people on the team. Because a lot of that is you're pulling teeth trying to get the information out of Sanyo as to what happened here, or Travis, what did you change on this change list where you said cleanup? There's something people need to look at. But what came out of that is I'm actually writing an automated script to go and pull our Perforce check-ins. That's our revision control software. Anything that goes into the game goes through our revision control software. And people are supposed to be adding release notes to that stuff. Well, I'm actually adding it so they can format things and they can mark which things need to be, if they want to put a note for QA, it can go to QA. If they want to put a something where this is for the live release notes, they can mark that up in it and basically give them a quick way to mark that up. So rather than this being I hope Atos remembers to go and update the patch notes when we put out a new QA build, which of course I never do. It is just an automated system where there will be a spreadsheet that will be constantly updated by an automatic process that will be going and pulling change list information and notes out of the change list that have been marked up by the people who checked them in, so that we can give you these things, anytime we have a QA build out, it's no effort. You guys can go see what actually changed in this build. So hopefully,
that would
I have a question.
Yeah, so that'll go live. I should have that working, well, definitely this release, but I'm hoping to get that working early in the release so that I can, we can have that for QA, and you guys can see when a new QA build comes out, you can see exactly, oh, here's the changes that went into that. There's still a few questions answered, like, do I strip the names off, or do we, leave that on there so that people are pressured on the team of like, make sure and look productive to the testers out there. I will probably strip that off just because how some people work, it doesn't work that well. Like Travis frequently will go 2 weeks without checking anything in, and he checks in a whole level or something. But anyways, I'll try and get that done, and you guys should be getting automated QA notes where you can see exactly what went into them. And the current plan is actually that for the QA side of things, it will actually just be dumped to a shared Google spreadsheet that you guys will be able to see. Just because I have something that also lets you guys, if you want to, people can go and make, add notes to that and make comments on. So anyways, yes, getting you guys involved more, getting back into the groove on testing things, which again fell through largely due to just missing team members due to tragedy, and then also just a few larger events that kind of pushed QA back over the last couple months. But going forward, hope to have one out this release. We'll probably get our last big patch out, what we call lifting lockdown, which is right now I'm still taking every single thing that gets checked in on the project. I'm moving it to live with only me testing it. But the dev team knows to be careful. That's what we call it lockdown. You don't check anything in unless you have permission or been told to, or it's a critical bug.
Chris,
Yeah.
I have a question regarding, we are many people that are ranged,
Mhm.
I love ranged. I love ranged. It's the best part of the game. But despite that, we have some skills in the range tree. Disabling shot. Let's take that. Very powerful one that you need to use in order to slow the target, right?
Yep.
Yep. But what is a little strange for me is that the damage is okay and everything, but the movement rate is still minus 50% at 13 seconds at 120. But if you move to 140 in skill, it's still minus 50 move rate for 13.7 seconds. That's 0.7 seconds. Is that intentional?
It's one of those things that's tough to figure out how long to put things on. We continued to increase the duration of personal buffs, positive stuff you put on yourself. We have not done much to increase the duration or power of debuffs on things. We think for range guys, that feels like a shot we want you to have to do occasionally, not apply it once and be done with it forever. In terms of, so the duration probably won't increase much. But in terms of the percentage slowdown, that's one of those things we've gone back and forth on and how to handle it and how to handle the slowness on stuff. Obviously, that's one that's intended for a play style of a kiting range person, someone who's going to be shooting stuff and running around, kiting it around, staying ahead of it. So really, we were just kind of shooting for enough of a slowdown to keep it from catching you if you wanted to stay ahead of it.
I think too, it was kind of, there was a time when you put down your field of ice in a disabling shot, and you slowed you did it right. You could have one of the biggest mobs in the game was just going to stand there and look at you like it was too OP.
It was worse than that. Yeah, it just sit there and basically be paralyzed like a statue. So that's one where there was a hard cap put in on it. I think the disabling shot by itself was not one of the OP ones. It was more a matter of the combination of things. So that's one that's actually a little tougher to solve. There's a lot of different stuff going on because what I really wanted to do for that stuff. Oh, I'm still on my stream. You want to say hi to people?
Maxine, hi from Minerva.
How about 7 minutes? Give me 7 minutes. Okay. I'll try, Pumpkin. You guys hear I'm under pressure in here. But yeah, that's one I would love to have. The thing I wanted to change the movement debuff to was make them also, they're a little more of a movement debuff. So more like 75%, but make them so none of them stack. And that's one I've continued to toy with that idea. That helps the individual, especially like a range person, if the debuff increases. But then it can hurt some mechanics. The challenge with it is honestly you start getting people who get angry with each other, because maybe ice field, it feels like, well, that should only be more like a 50% debuff. And then you try to shoot him with your disabling shot, and now suddenly, he's moving faster because the ice field overwrites him. And then you get into all the crazy logic of, well, do you have a 50% slow with a minute left on it overwrite a 75% slow with 10 seconds left on it? Again, there's a lot of weirdness in there. I agree that one.
The only thing, Chris, I think that's a little strange is the duration. Why make 0.7 seconds for 20 levels? We are talking high levels here.
Look at that. That is another one that, again, just like many things in the game where it evolved over time, there wasn't a consistent rule for how that stuff should work. And so in a lot of those cases, that's an old enough skill, and I don't think I've changed the duration on it. That may be one that is left over from B's initial pass, because I think that's one of our skills that's been there since the start of the game, basically.
Yeah, just to add a little bit, if I may. And I think, Kinrael, it's a perfect question you've added here, because the example you were giving us here on disabling shot, basically, if we look at the diminishing returns on a lot of skills, there is a fistful of skills which, even if you throw a few 100 million or a billion at it, it will receive 0.x something something. And it's just a fistful of skills which seem to be in that range. And I think this specific skill we were talking about is one of them. That these are so deep in the diminishing returns that even with the better XP income we see nowadays, it's hard to get a decimal point up. Even
Yeah, that's also. I'm sorry, I interrupt. One of the things that we need to think about is when you are an archer, then you have to have an advantage, and you also have to have a disadvantage. That's of course you need to be heard on if you are. But then again, if you're not fast, then the mob cannot get you. But despite that, spending so much XP in a skill, when we're talking 120 to 140, I've just gotten that. It's I think it's 86 million, something like. And
so
then,
I'm looking at this one now and can confirm that it is what I thought it was, which is it is math that's left over from the old days. When I started taking over stuff, I tried to, if there was something I needed, we actually have the ability for all of our values that we can actually just put in a formula, which is cool, but it's a little bit dangerous because then you have 400 different skills, and you've got, if you're inserting a formula actually into this arithmetic and the skill, it gets crazy because then you want to go change something like, okay, well, we want to change how the duration on these things works. Well, you have to go and touch like every single skill that has it. The thing that I've been doing over time is I've been working on skills. I've been going and pulling those things out, putting it into code, and just putting it in as a variable that's in there. So instead of it being I'm looking at disabling shot right now. You ready to hear the math behind disabling shot? The duration is the square root of skill level times 20 minus the square root of the target strength. Take that to the 0.66 power, and then multiply that by disabling shot debuff length. So that's kind of how things used to be done, whereas a lot of math inserted into the formula.
Okay.
The thing I've been doing is the same thing I've done with creatures in episode 2, which is there's just a single thing that you call, and if you want to have the a duration thing, then great. You ask it the duration, you hand it skill level, and that way, if I need to go change things, if we say these things are bad, we just have to change them in one place.
Okay,
so in particular, I will fix right now and move it over to the system. But again, that's one. Speaking of things that need to have a look at every single one and reevaluate it.
And last thing, and then I'll shut my mouth. Once, I think it was back in 71 or something, you had a live stream on Friday, and I tried to ask if you had a thought about, or you mentioned it yourself, you had a thought about having some sort of an archery stance. Is that something you've been working on since that, or have you thrown that in the garbage can? Or
I have not thrown it in the garbage can. This is another one that as I continue to look at balance, right now the top, and you know this, although you may not want to admit it because you're afraid I'll nerf something, but archers are still, the range tree is still top of the totem pole in terms of flexibility and power. They're kind of up there in the same category as like fire being a little more powerful than anything else in the magic trees. But range, so it's one of those things, I do think it makes sense, and it is on my list of stuff to do. I just have not prioritized it because I don't feel like range needs that much love right now. Right now, subterfuge is the next thing that's getting some love from me. I started on last release. But that is one, adding more stances. I do like the idea of having different stances and different things that affect you in different ways. But yeah, I will get to it. It still is on my list of skills. I think I actually even added a placeholder ID for it. So it will get done. I just, like I said, haven't prioritized it. Give me one last question, somebody.
Thank you.
Make it really big and broad. What is it, if you could get people in the game to really catch your vision of this is excellence, this is what you're going for, whatever, that you want to share, why don't you share it with us now? I know you did your paper, but like your personal from Chris, what do you really want people to know?
That's a tough one. I mean, that is super broad. I guess the thing I'm trying to make sure people know and understand with the game is I think that, obvious stuff that I've called out specifically, like the bug fixing and polish and balance stuff, is hugely important. But I guess the other thing I want people to understand is my goal for the game. I think for years we spent a lot of time trying to do what I think others in the same field and category of games did, which is trying to figure out how to extract as much money from whales as possible to help sustain the game. Well, I think that's important. The thing I've been trying to do all along, my strategy for the game going forward, and it has been, and hopefully it's at least visible, although it's been kind of a slow crawl to get there, but is one, make the game a better game, make the game more fun for new players coming in, not just the old players, but for new players coming in. And then two, move further away from having the game being fully supported by whales and making it expensive, and try to pull things down so the game is more accessible to everybody. Because I think the most important thing we can do long term is continue to grow our audience. Again, the improved reviews is one of those things I look at. Our slight uptick in players, although I know I hear a lot of, there's some metrics that you can look at that show that it's not. We've actually been slowly ticking up in players since the November timeframe. But I mean, I want people to know that the thing that I'm passionate about is getting people into the game. It's just a real challenge on doing that with a long-term game. So again, I'm playing the long game, which is just focus as much as possible on making the game better, focus less on maximizing money, and just knowing that if I continue to make the game better and continue to improve the bugs, continue to improve balance while continuing to listen to players and pulling the price down, hopefully we will be getting more players in the game, which fixes the money problems as well, but also makes the game more enjoyable for everybody. So again, that's kind of the thing I want people to know is that this is very much my plan is a long-term plan. And I know everybody wants stuff quick, but I'm trying to make sure we make the game better slowly over time and slowly grow the number of people in it. And again, be able to attract new people. We can't attract people to the game if people feel like they can't have fun in the game unless they spend thousands or even hundreds of dollars. We want people to be able to come in and have fun. That's why anytime I've had Elgarion doing stuff, I'm making sure he's not just doing stuff for the store, that he's doing a lot of stuff that is craftable, that drops in game. Even things like you guys saw the new food stuff. I think you guys even mentioned it. The food that lets you do stuff similar to the Obsidian Potion of Learning, where it increases the training rate. And that's one of those where that I saw that, and then we talked about it, and it's like, yeah, let's do it. It competes with stuff that we actually sell, but it's something that players want. It's something that will, for new players, being able to have that accelerated feeling of coolness without having to spend money is important. And then the really dedicated players are going to buy the potion too, because it'll stack with it. But again, trying to make sure we're focusing on making the game fun, and that if we improve things money-wise long-term, it's not because we found some way to extract more money from you guys. It's because we found a way to make the game a little more fun, which got 10% more people into the game, which means that our revenues went up 10%, and that it's okay that we drop some of these big money items, which we probably will. I mean, that's I think people knew that I was the one that was pushing to get rid of the Lord of the Isles stuff, as much as I hate dead content that we do just to make it super exclusive. But if we have any big money things long term, we're going to make them very explicit.
I'm listening right there.
That you can buy, that you can do, that will help the game. That it's basically you giving money to the game, but making it feel, less like you're buying a really expensive item in the game, more like this is a super pledge that you're helping the developers. So, anyways, long and wordy, but that's kind of what I want people to know.
I think that was perfect. I don't think it was long and wordy. I think it was really critical.
Well, I'd like to get one thing in just before Chris runs away.
Okay, go for it. Last one.
Long time bug
Okay.
The NPCs do not move around in basements. The spawner ones do. The cats will. But if you put down one of the like I have the broom, and it does its in place animations, but it doesn't walk around. The servant will stand where you put him, turn around, he'll talk to you, but he won't walk around. And it seems to be in most basements.
And yeah, I've heard some of these things. This is actually one that Lainey is looking at for me, trying to get together a list of all the situations for basements and dungeons. That there's a lot of weird stuff because it's not all NPCs. It's not all, it's not all basements. It's some combination. And before I go diving into that stuff, I kind of like to have a list of, here's some exact cases where it works, and here's some exact cases where it doesn't work, so that I don't spend too much time banging my head against it or, setting up the situation, getting all my debug stuff in place, and then I can't reproduce it. But yeah, it also gives me hints as to why if some work and some don't, let me go see what's different between these two. I'm aware of those things. I actually have been looking at the dungeon side of things. I hadn't looked at basement side of things recently. But my guess is if I find one, it's going to solve the other as well. So.
You thought that once before, but I'm hoping you're right.
Well, hopefully, again, like I said, Lainey and Alley-oop and some of these other people who do a ton of that type of super detailed testing will be able to help me out with that. We'll see. And that's the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, I fully am aware that I am underwater in so many different areas. I think that's one of those things that people who've come on the team always notice is I still get up early. I still rise early.
The rise.
Working. But I'm at or on the computer, especially since pandemic times. I'm at or on the computer or within a few feet of the computer pretty much 16 to 17 hours a day. And doing stuff. I'm not stressed about it. Don't feel like this is me killing myself on this stuff.
I also don't want you to fall.
Yes, but yeah, it's not I'm working myself to death thing. I actually enjoy a lot of this stuff. But even though I enjoy it and I get a lot of hours in, I still am underwater in a lot of categories or areas. And I would love. I'm so excited if we can actually get this new person to start up. I'm so excited to have a new person who can come on and be the guy who goes and looks at some of these things besides me. So super excited, and hopefully we will get to those. I know that's a long time bug.
No, that's one it's been my little pet bug for the longest time because it worked when they worked when we had dungeons and not basements. I mean basements and dungeons. It broke. And then you fixed it, and then it broke again. And you had said something about we found it. It's a nav mesh thing. We fixed it. The dungeons and everything works, except that it didn't.
One of those things I can tell you that's one of those systems that's really fragile. Undone did the part of the system, but there's a lot of different parts to it, and that's one that there's a lot of moving elements to it. So there's some automated systems in there. And sometimes those automated systems break things over time. The automated system for those is we have an automated system that when someone makes a change to a basement, when someone makes a change to a dungeon room, when someone makes a change to a house, there's an automated system that goes in, grabs it, checks things out, and builds the nav mesh for it, and then checks that back in. And that's what I have seen happen a few times. So this is one that the fix for it may be that I shut that system down and tell it not to, automatically go and update these things anytime something is touched. Because that has happened at least a couple times, is that system goes and breaks things, and it's not very consistent. And then it ends up breaking like these 3 dungeon rooms. Why those 3 dungeon rooms? Well, because somebody touched this prefab, and that prefab is included in those 3 dungeon rooms, and therefore it detected a change, and now it's going to go rebuild nav mesh, and oh look, it broke the nav mesh for those 3. It's that type of stuff that happens behind the scenes, there's so many things we just couldn't do on the game, especially with a small team, if we didn't have a ton of automation. But sometimes that automation can poison us and cause bugs where it's one of those bugs where everyone on the team looks around and kind of shrugs, and it's like, not me, I didn't touch it, I didn't do anything. And it's like, yeah, that's because some computer sitting in the data center went and touched it and broke things. So, but yeah, I'll try and look at that stuff. As I mentioned, I'm already looking at the dungeon stuff right now, so I'll see. If you want to send me your specific room, or if you have it right now and want to tell me a specific room pet combo that I should make sure works, I'll try and add that.
I'd be happy to show it to you, or I mean, it's just around the corner.
Well, just if you can tell me what room, or tell me if you can do the send me the /loc, like just email me in game if you want to do the /loc, because if you do /loc and then you paste, it actually puts a weird string in there, this crazy long debug looking string that looks like hexadecimal stuff. If you can give me that string and take me to from your dungeon, then I can go in and do it. And don't worry that I don't have access to your dungeon, because worst case is I'll just log in as you.
Yeah, had that done before.
All right, guys, I should probably wrap this up before the little one here starts protesting.
Or thank you. And, for me, and I'm sure Vero has some, but I just really appreciate when you take your time. I know your time is really valuable when you take it to set aside for us. We don't unappreciate that. We don't take it for granted. And I know personally, I really enjoy these.
Yep, I mean, I've been open all along that I love coming to these things too, because you guys bring stuff to my attention that maybe fell through the cracks, or just I hadn't heard a perspective. Sometimes I hear something of someone saying I want to change whatever, or crippling shot is bad, but then having the explanation of, well, it's not that it's weak, it's not that it doesn't do something effective, it's that between the skill levels of 100 to 120 you gain almost nothing and you pay tens of million experience points. So getting that type of interaction with you guys, I think, is super valuable to me, which is super valuable to the game. So always glad to do it.
Awesome. Thanks again. Run off to your little girl.
All right. Well, I'm going to head off to the little girl. I will fix the crippling shot, or disabling shot. I think that's one of those skills that is, in code, it's called one thing. We have to set up enum names for things. I think in code it's crippling shot, but in the game it's disabling shot. So you'll occasionally hear me call a skill by the wrong name. I'm calling it by the wrong or right name. You guys are calling it by the wrong name. Just so you know.
Chris, I'm standing in my basement. I tried to do your /loc thing for you, but how do I copy that for you?
It should be in your buffer already if you just paste it. If you want to send it to me right now, just whisper it to Atos and I'll have it.
To just Control P.
Yeah, just Control V to paste. No public vendor in Soultown. Man. Yeah, we need one.
All right, cool. Thanks again. I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Thank you, Atos.
That's the way to end that summer. Yeah.
All right,
well, let's stay to, I actually, with me being gone so long and I came back, one of the first places they brought me was going over to the well. And I was like, dang, this is cool. Because it's just very different. It's not a remashed same old, same old. It was creative and cool.
Yeah, and that's, not to ramble on too long about, but that's another thing. I mean, I've mentioned that as much as I know there's a lot of talent on the old dev team in terms of the level builders, I think it was pretty well known that my number one complaint, besides them building the level for looks instead of play value, but also that every map felt like it was, you could find a chunk of that map pulled in. Here's a chunk out of Montana. None of it was high fantasy. None of it really felt like what should be a high fantasy game. It all felt like parts of America built very beautifully and with no combat zones. So that's Travis is obviously the one still with us for reasons that are obvious in terms of he also agrees with the idea that we should be making something that feels, not every scene, but at least some scenes feel fantastical, feel high fantasy, feel like something you expect to see in a good movie type thing. And so that's one of those scenes that we talked about doing for a while. And again, that one had a lot of different reasons to do it, but including the pot scene, hopefully making that into a player-owned town template that people can use. But yeah, glad you like it. All right, well, I just got the magic string from Karen Murphy. Is it Karen or Karen?
Yes.
All right, good. Nailed it. But guys, I'm going to log off. Thanks for having me so much. And again, you don't have to wait 3 months or whatever. Anytime you want to have me in here. I actually, while I was here, apparently word got out that I was here and spilling beans on stuff, which is also totally fine if you guys share anything that happens in the stream. But I think I'm talking to the BMC next week, so I'm going to be over there next week. But if you guys want to have me back,
it's cool. Once you come into one, like if you haven't been for a while, people kind of forget, and then you come in, and then somebody hears about it, they're like, well, why can't we have them? And you're like, you can. So it starts a string. I like that.
All right, let's let this guy go.
Yep. All right, guys. I will.
Look for me.
All right, we'll do. Talk to you guys next.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, that was very fun. Now
awesome.
I'm going to go through really
Thank
quick.
you,
Hang
Vero.
on a second. And I just realized I probably should have done this sooner. I had to mute a couple of people, and I apologize. And I tried to whisper, but because you didn't have your mics muted yourself, and you kept keying up and making noises, and I was getting whispered. And so I had to mute a couple of people because it was got background noises.
No, for everybody who added questions, I really tried to add questions from everybody who added a few. If I missed you, sorry, but the list is still here. Everything we went over, I made red, and there's still a bunch black. So we got a list for next time. But I do think that we have had a lot of information in this.
Yes.
This one.
Yeah, this went really well. I actually really like the format overall. I think that the way that we did it was really nice. Putting it together, clusters of topics, with questions and follow-up questions, I think it works really well.
Some of the people in the
what's
guild
the code?
code, we have Rojoy, we have Sir Polo, we have many people in our guild that actually, if I may call it this without harassing any people, but I would call people veterans, if you know what I mean, experience-wise. And I thought it was very important with the diminishing return. That's why I took that disabling thing.
No, it was great. But the reality is there's a lot of good questions like that, and I think that was the way it worked in was perfect. But having those come in, so it doesn't get too distracting, but we should keep those ongoing. And if it's okay, Vero, I'm throwing you under the bus a little bit. Like we ongoing, when you come up with good, solid questions that you really wish you knew the answer to, give it to Vero. He'll have his list, put them on there, and then we'll try to work those into these. We'll have these more often. And we get there to a point where let's go ahead and have a free for all. The thing that can happen, and it did not happen here, so it's not in response to this, is that people get distracted. Like he can answer a question. Somebody is asking something either very specific that has nothing to do with the bigger contents of most people in the game, or ask questions that have already been answered, and it can get a little goofy, So to keep things moving, to keep things going, that's why we tried this format. We've done different ones where we've asked questions and he pulls them out of a box. We've tried different formats, and we'll try them up again. But I think this one has been one of my favorites. Pull things together in topics, and the big thing is letting him go and just ramble, because that's where you get the best information.
Yeah.
That's where the beans come out, because it's just coming off the top of his head.
Yep. And you see his brain working, and it cracks me up. I remember one time I was at work and I was at my break, and it was about something totally different. We were talking on the phone, And I'm in the break room and I'm like, you know what? Well, what really annoys me is you're stupid having to roll for loot. You're sitting there trying to fight. You have to keep hitting that button. He goes, what? Okay, yeah, why can't we just have an automatic roll for loot? And he's like, oh, I've got the perfect person to do that. They just told me they didn't know what to do. And it was in a day later. It was like, that's just how his brain works. If you get it at the right time, it gets done real fast.
And that's like he's going to work on disabling shot right now because of what Kinrael brought up.
Like Kinrael said, it perfect timing, perfect place, right place, right time. When
I
he
don't
was
think
for
so.
something, it's perfect.
Paul, I like what you said. No, I don't think so because he has really a lot of loose ends, and he is probably have so much that he. What do you call it when you get stressed and you go down by your work? What's it called in English?
No, you know what? Honestly, though, I think Psycho's right. I think he's actually going to go work on that right away. That's how he does stuff like this. Doesn't stress him, doesn't slow him down, doesn't make him unproductive. Stuff like this rejuvenates him. He gets excited. He gets inspired. The problem with Chris is that he gets inspired. He starts going down a path. Then he gets almost done, and something else inspires him. Squirrel, and then you didn't get that last little bit done and finish it. And so that's what we got to keep him on task.
Now, I would think a big thing what we're seeing here, and it answers a bunch of questions when he says we're very happy that we're gonna see another member on board because we only have so many hours we can put in, and that answers a lot of questions. There are so many things to fix, but there's only so many hands working on a project that it all takes time, and I think. As long as the game sticks up and the prioritization is done in a good way, that we're gonna see stuff being fixed, and if we can in the meanwhile sometimes have him here and throw out some things which are broke and he can fix it on the in the butterfly way, even better. But yeah. I think it's really
Okay.
good that we've had this attention and a lot of new information, and it's always good that the dev just jumps in.
And gonna, since he's not in here, I want to throw my little 2 cents in at this. This game should be about fun, and I think he's really true about what he's saying. It's not about going after whales. Don't go after the money, go after the product, and the money will come, basically. But with him not in the room, for them to get those extra developers, it takes us buying Kodos, subscribing or buying Kodos. And I know some people pride themselves in the fact they never have put a penny in the game. Well, how would you like it if, your job never paid you? So my point is, if you can, some people can do more, or some people can't do it all. But if you can subscribe, if you can buy Kodos, if you can do this, don't buy them from other players when you can. Buy them from the game itself, because that's going to keep them hiring those developers that are going to get the bugs fixed, that are going to get the content fixed, that's going to get that stuff. So that's my commercial for today.
I'm going to add on to your comment because I was about to say something similar, but the fact that he's able to hire that extra developer right now tells us that the game is moving forward and the money is coming in enough for him to hire a whole nother crew member, because that's the largest expense with any company is employees. So
far. And so if we want to see it, buy shit. It really comes down to, buy some stuff. The $9 a month is, I think, how much I spend on stupid things that I don't use as much. I spend more time here than on my streaming channels. I spend more time here than going to a movie or whatever, buy a book, So for value, I made sure I do a couple. I've couple my alts that are getting, what do you call those? The subscriptions. And it's not even about the subscription. It's because I feel like I'm getting my value out of the product. And as long as I'm getting value out of the product, I think it's a workman is worth his wages. He's worth getting a paycheck. Anyway, enough commercial. Sorry, but I enjoy myself. I'm really glad he came this week instead of last week. Got more time.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I think it's gonna be late enough for me. It'll be early up tomorrow, almost 11 o'clock here, so gonna be logging off.
You know, he's trying to say that he has a life.
Good night, Vero.
So-
Yeah,
Same.
well, little bit.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you.